As the sun set over the 18th century French colonies, casting a golden glow over the brutal landscape, the shadows whispered secrets of unspeakable suffering. The year was 1685, and the world was about to witness one of the most heinous chapters in human history, the Code Noir. This French colonial law of slavery would ensnare millions of Africans in chains of despair, reducing them to mere commodities. Their stories, etched in blood and tears, cry out for remembrance. In 1685, King Louis XIV signed the Code Noir, formally establishing slavery in French colonies. Crafted by French jurist Jean-Baptiste Colbert, this draconian law, to mildly and precisely put it, 1. Legitimized transatlantic slave trade and entrenched racial hierarchy. 2. Reduced enslaved Africans to property, denying their humanity. 3. Legalized brutal punishments, such as branding, mutilation, and execution for enslaved blacks. 4. Forbade the enslaved from gathering, marrying, or owning anything.
By the time we hands together.
5. Separated families through forced sales. 6. Enforced its religion on the enslaved population. We could just go on and on with the listings, but these aforementioned summarizes it all. It's in fact a very sad one. The Code Noir's legacy casts a long shadow over history, reminding us of the dark depths to which humanity can descend. On our way down this dark journey of untold inhumanity and abandon, don't forget to kindly support our works by hitting the thumb button in front of you. Subscribe to our channel if you're yet to, and share our deep-rooted history, revealing videos to keep spreading awareness, as this will go a great way in helping us to do more. Now, let's dive into the subject proper, shall we?
A lucrative business to me, this slave trading. Going to all that trouble rounding everybody up only to throw them overboard?
No, it's very lucrative.
The Code Noir tells us a very long story that started in Versailles at the court of Louis XIV, the Sun King, in March 1685, and ended in Paris in April 1848 under Arago at the beginning of the ephemeral Second Republic. Enacted in 1685 by King Louis XIV of France, the Code Noir stands as a chilling testament to the brutal institution of slavery in the French colonies. This draconian legal code codified the exploitation, dehumanization, and suffering of enslaved Africans, casting a long shadow over the history of the Caribbean and the Americas. The origins of the Code Noir trace back to the 17th century, when France sought to establish its colonial empire in the Caribbean and Americas. As the demand for sugar and other commodities grew, so too did the need for a workforce to cultivate and harvest these resources grow. Enslaved Africans, forcibly transported from their homelands, became the backbone of these colonial economies. The Code Noir, enacted by King Louis XIV, aimed to establish order and control over this enslaved population, ensuring their continued exploitation for the benefit of the French crown. Simultaneously, the code also served a religious purpose, as it mandated the forced conversion of enslaved Africans to Catholicism, further eroding their cultural identity and imposing a foreign religion upon them. This religious conversion was seen as a means of civilizing and controlling the enslaved population.
What you looking at, boy?
Life under the Code Noir was a harrowing ordeal for enslaved Africans. They were subjected to brutal working conditions, often toiling in the sweltering heat for long hours. Harsh punishments, including whippings, mutilations, other forms of physical punishments, and even death for the slightest infractions, were commonplace. Furthermore, resistance of slaves was met with swift and severe retaliation. Families were torn apart, with children sold away from their parents and husbands separated from their wives. Enslaved individuals were denied basic human rights, including the right to marry, own property, or receive an education. They were mere chattel, bought and sold like livestock, their destinies determined by the whims of their masters. The Code Noir also imposed strict restrictions on the lives of free people of color, a category that included individuals of mixed racial heritage. While they were not technically enslaved, they were subject to discriminatory laws that limited their social and economic opportunities. Free people of color were often denied access to education, certain professions, and positions of power. They were also subject to racial prejudice and discrimination, further marginalizing them within colonial society. Although published 2 years after his death, the Code Noir, also called the Black Code, is usually attributed, at least in spirit, to Jean-Baptiste Colbert, the famous minister of Louis XIV. Colbert, known as a great financier, the founder of the French Navy, and the reorganizer of French commerce and industry, was also a remarkable jurist, as noted in the book Great Jurists of the World. He was at the origin of the codifying ordinances adopted during the reign of Louis XIV, such as the Civil Ordinance, the Criminal Ordinance, the Commerce Ordinance, and the Navy Ordinance. The Colonial Ordinance of 1685, best known as the Code Noir, was the last one to be prepared during his ministry and may have been completed by his son, the Marquis de Seignelay. Although subsequent decrees modified some of its provisions, the gist of the code remained in place until 1848. The code's 60 articles regulated the life, death, purchase, religion, and treatment of slaves by their masters in all French colonies. It provided that the slaves should be baptized and educated in the Catholic faith. It prohibited masters from making their slaves work on Sundays and religious holidays. It required that slaves be clothed and fed and taken care of when sick. It prohibited slaves from owning property and stated that they had no legal capacity. It also governed their marriages, their burials, their punishments, and the conditions they had to meet in order to gain their freedom. On the surface, the Code Noir seemed to prioritize slave welfare, establishing standardized laws and regulations for humane treatment. Provisions requiring slave owners to provide basic necessities and prohibiting excessive punishment appeared progressive. However, beneath this facade lay a more sinister reality. The Code Noir reinforced racial hierarchy, solidifying African enslavement and perpetuating the transatlantic slave trade. By presenting the Code Noir as a humanitarian effort, Louisiana's colonial authorities deflected criticism while maintaining colonial dominance. This strategic move allowed Louisiana to counter European criticism, maintain international credibility, and protect economic interests tied to slavery. The Louisiana Code Noir became a masterful exercise in political maneuvering, masking slavery's brutal truth beneath a veneer of compassion. The Code Noir imposed harsh penalties for noncompliance. According to the Code Noir, any enslaved person that tries escaping faces severe punishment like branding, amputation, or death. On account of violence against owners or free individuals, the consequence was death. Also, enslaved individuals face consequences like whipping or branding for gathering in groups or carrying arms. During this era, slave owners risked fines and potential confiscation of slaves for neglecting their basic needs, excessive punishment, separating slave families, or refusing religious instruction. Free individuals faced fines and imprisonment for harboring escaped slaves, unauthorized trade, or violating Catholic regulations, and non-compliance with these laws could result in fines, imprisonment, exile, or even capital punishment, with repeated offenses leading to confiscation of property, including slaves. However, enforcement varied across colonies, and consequences often depended on local authorities. To regulate relations between slaves and colonists, the Louisiana Code Noir, based largely on that which was compiled in 1685 for the French Caribbean colonies, was introduced in 1724 and remained in force until the United States took possession of Louisiana in 1803. The Code's 54 articles regulated the status of slaves and free blacks, as well as relations between masters and slaves. Let's have a brief look at what the entire body of laws was like. Article 1. We desire and we expect that the Edict of 23rd April, 1615 of the late King, our most honored Lord and Father, who remains glorious in our memory, be executed in our islands. This accomplished, we enjoin all of our officers to chase from our islands all the Jews who have established residence there. As with all declared enemies of Christianity, we command them to be gone within 3 months of the day of issuance of the order, at the risk of confiscation of their persons and their goods. Article 2. All slaves that shall be in our islands shall be baptized and instructed in the Roman, Catholic, and Apostolic faith. We enjoin the inhabitants who shall purchase newly arrived Negroes to inform the governor and intendant of said islands of this fact within no more than 8 days, or risk being fined an arbitrary amount. They shall give the necessary orders to have them instructed and baptized within a suitable amount of time. Article 3. We forbid any religion other than the Roman, Catholic, and Apostolic faith from being practiced in public. We desire that offenders be punished as rebels disobedient of our orders. We forbid any gathering to that end, which we declare to be conventicle, illegal, and seditious, and subject to the same punishment as would be applicable to the masters who permit it or accept it from their slaves. Article 4. No persons assigned to positions of authority over Negroes shall be other than a member of the Roman, Catholic, and Apostolic faith, and the master who assigned these persons shall risk having the said Negroes confiscated, and arbitrary punishment levied against the persons who accepted said position of authority. Article 5. We forbid our white subjects of both sexes to marry with the blacks, under the penalty of being fined and subjected to some other arbitrary punishment. We forbid all curates, priests, or missionaries of our secular or regular clergy, and even our chaplains in our navy to sanction such marriages. We also forbid all our white subjects, and even the manumitted or free-born blacks, to live in a state of concubinage with blacks. Should there be any issue from this kind of intercourse, it is our will that the person so offending, and the master of the slave, should pay each a fine of 300 livres. Should said issue be the result of the concubinage of the master with his slave, said master shall not only pay the fine, but be deprived of the slave and of the children, who shall be adjudged to the hospital of the locality, and said slaves shall be forever incapable of being set free. But should this illicit intercourse have existed between a free black and his slave, when said free black had no legitimate wife, and should said black marry said slave according to the forms prescribed by the church, said slave shall be thereby set free, and the children shall also become free and legitimate, and in such a case there shall be no application of the penalties mentioned in the present article. Article 6. We enjoin all our subjects, of whatever religion and social status they may be, to observe Sundays and the holidays that are observed by our subjects of the Roman, Catholic, and Apostolic faith. We forbid them to work, nor make their slaves work on said days from midnight until the following midnight. They shall neither cultivate the earth, manufacture sugar, nor perform any other work, at the risk of a fine and an arbitrary punishment against the masters, and of confiscation by our officers of as much sugar worked by said slaves before being caught. Article 7. The ceremonies and forms prescribed by the Ordinance of Blois and by the Edict of 1639 for marriages shall be observed both with regard to free persons and slaves. But the consent of the father and mother of the slave is not necessary. That of the master shall be the only one required. Article 8. We forbid all curates to proceed to effect marriages between slaves without proof of the consent of their masters, and we also forbid all masters to force their slaves into any marriage against their will. Article 9. Children issued from the marriage of slaves shall follow the condition of their parents, and shall belong to the master of the wife and not of the husband, if the husband and wife have different masters. Article 10. If the husband be a slave and the wife a free woman, it is our will that their children, of whatever sex they may be, shall share the condition of their mother, and be as free as she, notwithstanding the servitude of their father. And if the father be free, and the mother a slave, the children shall all be slaves. Article 11. Masters shall have their Christian slaves buried in consecrated ground. Article 12. We forbid slaves to carry offensive weapons or heavy sticks, under the penalty of being whipped, and of having said weapons confiscated for the benefit of the person seizing the same. An exception is made in favor of those slaves who are sent hunting or shooting by their masters, and who carry with them a written permission to that effect, or are designated by some known mark or badge. Article 13. We forbid slaves belonging to different masters to gather in crowds either by day or by night, under the pretext of a wedding or for any other cause, either at the dwelling or on the grounds of one of their masters, or elsewhere, and much less on the highways or in secluded places, under the penalty of corporal punishment, which shall not be less than the whip. In case of frequent offenses of the kind, the offender shall be branded with the mark of the flower de luce, and should there be aggravating circumstances, capital punishment may be applied at the discretion of our judges. We command all our subjects, be they officers or not, to seize all such offenders, to arrest and conduct them to prison, although there should be no judgment against them. Article 14. Masters who shall be convicted of having permitted or tolerated such gatherings as aforesaid, composed of other slaves than their own, shall be sentenced individually to indemnify their neighbors for the damages occasioned by said gatherings, and to pay, for the first time, a fine of 30 livres, and double that sum on the repetition of the offense. Article 15. We forbid Negroes to sell any commodities, provisions, or produce of any kind without the written permission of their masters, or without wearing their known marks or badges, and any persons purchasing anything from Negroes in violation of this article shall be sentenced to pay a fine of 1,500 livres. Articles 16 to 19 provide at length for the clothing of slaves and for their subsistence. Article 20. Slaves who shall not be properly fed, clad, and provided for by their masters may give information thereof to the Attorney General of the Superior Council or to all the other officers of justice of an inferior jurisdiction, and may put the written exposition of their wrongs into their hands, upon which information, and even ex officio, should the information come from another quarter, the Attorney General shall prosecute said masters without charging any cost to the complainants. It is our will that this regulation be observed in all accusations for crimes or barbarous and inhuman treatment brought by slaves against their masters. Article 21. Slaves who are disabled from working, either by old age, disease, or otherwise, be the disease incurable or not, shall be fed and provided for by their masters, and in case they should have been abandoned by said masters, said slaves shall be adjudged to the nearest hospital, to which said masters shall be obliged to pay 8 cents a day for the food and maintenance of each one of these slaves, and for the payment of this sum, said hospital shall have a lien on the plantations of the master. Article 22. Slaves can have no right to any kind of property, and all that they acquire, either by their own industry, or by the liberality of others, or by any other means or title whatever, shall be the full property of their masters, and the children of said slaves, their fathers and mothers, their kindred or other relations, either free or slaves, shall have no pretensions or claims thereto, either through testamentary dispositions or donations inter vivos, which dispositions and donations we declare null and void, and also whatever promises they may have made, or whatever obligations they may have subscribed to, as having been entered into by persons incapable of disposing of anything and of participating in any contract. Article 23. We forbid our subjects in this colony, of whatever condition and quality they may be, from purchasing or acquiring, under any pretext whatever, slaves other than those who have been, or shall be, imported from Africa by the company or by our special permission, and we forbid the sale of slaves thus imported to the Spanish, English, or other foreign nations, on pain of confiscation of the slaves and a fine of 3,000 livres for each offense. The articles of the Code Noir laws continued up to 60 clauses for France, while for Louisiana it was 54. The harsh realities of life under the Code Noir are vividly illustrated in the heart-wrenching experiences of certain blacks you may want to learn about. The daily lives of these enslaved individuals were marked by relentless toil and brutal conditions. They were forced to work long hours in the fields, enduring scorching heat, relentless rain, and the constant threat of physical abuse. Their living quarters were cramped and unsanitary, breeding disease and despair. They were denied adequate food and medical care, leaving them vulnerable to illness and malnutrition. These characters are as follows. 1. Olaudah Equiano. Olaudah Equiano, a prominent figure in the abolitionist movement, recounted his own harrowing experiences as a slave in the Caribbean. He described the horrors of the Middle Passage, the transatlantic slave trade, and the brutal conditions on the plantations. Olaudah Equiano's childhood in Nigeria was filled with laughter and learning, but at age 11, the nightmare began. Kidnapped and sold into slavery, Equiano endured the unspeakable horrors of slave ships and plantations. On the deck of a slave ship, Equiano witnessed the depths of human cruelty. The stench of death and disease clung to him like a shroud. Yet, amidst the chaos, Equiano found solace in the words of a British sailor who taught him to read and write. Equiano's autobiography would one day expose the atrocities of slavery. Freed in 1766, he became a powerful abolitionist, his voice ringing out against the injustice. To Francois Macandal. Macandal's journey began in West Africa, where he was born into a life of freedom. His village was alive with the sounds of drums, the smell of cooking fires, and the warmth of family. But one fateful day, Macandal's world was shattered. He was kidnapped and sold into slavery, forced to leave behind everything he loved. As he labored on the plantations of Saint-Domingue, Macandal's spirit refused to be broken. He remembered the stories of his ancestors who had fought against the invaders of their land. He recalled the rhythms of his village, which had once brought him joy, and he held on to the hope of freedom. Macandal's days were filled with the crack of whips, the sneers of overseers, and the endless toil, but he remained steadfast, his determination fueled by the memories of his past. One night, under the light of a full moon, Macandal slipped away, joining the Maroons who lived in the wilderness. Freedom's taste was sweet, but short-lived. Macandal was captured and tortured, his body broken, but his spirit remained unbroken. As he faced the agony of burning at the stake in 1758, Macandal's unyielding spirit remained a testament to the human capacity for resilience. 3. Marie Salomon. Marie Salomon's heart ached for her children, torn from her arms by the cold calculation of slavery. Her days blurred into an endless cycle of toil and despair, yet she held on to the love she shared with her family. Marie attempted escape multiple times, facing imprisonment and punishment. Each failure strengthened her resolve. In the darkness of her cell, Marie whispered stories of freedom to her fellow captives, keeping hope alive. Years passed, and Marie's body bore the scars of resistance, but her spirit remained unshaken. Finally, freedom came, and she reunited with her children. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she held them close, her love unwavering. Equiano's narrative, along with the testimonies of other former slaves, provides a powerful indictment of the Code Noir and the suffering it inflicted. Key figures like Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne, Sieur de Bienville, and Henrietta Johnson, driven by diverse motivations, left indelible marks on the state's slave laws and societal dynamics. The Code Noir's legacy extends far beyond Louisiana's colonial past, informing ongoing discussions on racism, equality, and justice. Its impact resonates through the centuries, a poignant reminder of the enduring struggle for human dignity and freedom. In closing, the Code Noir's legacy extends far beyond the 17th and 18th centuries. It shaped the racial hierarchies and social structures that persist in many societies today. The trauma inflicted upon enslaved Africans and their descendants continues to reverberate through generations. The Code Noir remains a stark reminder of the evils of slavery and the importance of fighting for justice and equality. It is a call to action to confront the legacies of the past and work towards a future where all individuals are treated with dignity and respect. This brings us to the end of yet another informative video segment. To continue exploring the untold stories of the African diaspora, do kindly hit the thumb button underneath this video. Also share with friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening Black narrative, and subscribe to our channel to stay tuned in always. By doing this, you're supporting our mission to illuminate hidden narratives and contributing to the important work of uncovering these vital stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.